Today we're going to make another project using a timer. This time I thought we'd make a progress bar, and we're going to use a different type of timer. And what I'll show you in this, although we're going to be applying it to a progress bar, is useful for doing any kind of animation. So in the last project we created a timer using the engine.createTimer object function. We're not going to do it this way today. We're going to use a panel timer. So you're probably familiar with panels, so we'll add a panel to our interface. Let's make this 500 by 200. So a panel is a UI control, and they've got lots of special properties, but one of them is they have their own timer built in, and that's what we're going to make use of in this video. And I think this is a really great one if you're doing animations, because generally you'll be drawing on a panel anyway, so if you've already got the panel there, you might as well use its timer callback for doing your animation sequences. We'll call this PNL Progress because we're making a progress bar. And we'll grab a reference to that. And this is the only component we're going to need today. So the first thing we've got to do is assign a timer callback function to our panel. And it's the same way we did it for the timer object in the previous video, except this time we're just going to refer to the panel. So it's PNL progress.setTimerCallback. And then we declare a function. And if you remember in the last video, we had two functions to start and stop the timer. One was timer.startTimer, and it's similar with this. We've got PNL progress.startTimer, and you can pass in a value in here of milliseconds, which determines the delay of the timer or how quickly the timer runs. And to stop the timer, we've got PNL progress.stopTimer. So exactly the same as we did it with the timer object, but this time it's just specific to this particular panel. Okay, we're also going to need a paint routine for our panel so that we can draw our progress bar. So we'll set a paint routine. And let's start by drawing this paint routine. So we're going to colour the whole panel in black. So we'll do g.fillAll colours.black. And if you want to see what colours are available, just stop at the dot, hit escape on your keyboard, and you can see all of the various colour choices you have. And these are just colour constants. You can of course put in a hex value as well. So 0x to denote that it's hex. And then the opacity level, then the red, green and blue. So that will fill it in black as well. But where possible, use the colour constants because it just makes it a bit easier to read. So we've filled our panel in black. So what we're going to do next is we're going to draw the background of our progress bar, and as you saw at the beginning, it's like a little rectangle. So first we're going to declare an array, and this is going to have our coordinates, our x, y, width and height that defines the size of our rectangle. So we'll call it A, and in here we're going to put our x, our y, our width and our height. And let's define the width and height first. Let's make it 20 pixels high. And the width, let's make it 400. Now what we need to figure out for the x and the y is we want our rectangle that we're going to draw inside our panel, our larger rectangle, we want it to be central. And the way we do that is we take the overall width of the panel, so we can use this.getWidth. We divide it by 2, and then we take the width of whatever we're drawing in here, our little progress bar panel in this case, which is 400, and we subtract it, and we also divide that by 2. So it's the overall width divided by 2, and from that we subtract the inner width and divide that by 2 as well. And we could just write here, of course, 200, but I think by putting it in as the equation, it makes it a bit easier to see how the value is derived. And then we're going to do exactly the same for the height, so that the vertical alignment is centered as well. So with this, it's going to be this.getHeight divided by 2 minus 20 divided by 2, because we've assigned a height of 20. And now we're going to draw our inner rectangle. So first of all, we need to select a colour. So we're going to make it dark grey. And then we're going to draw a rounded rectangle. We're going to fill a rounded rectangle actually. And we'll round the corners, let's say 5. And there we have our rectangle, and it's centered to the panel. Okay, the next thing we do for our progress bar is we've got to draw the actual progress meter within this grey background. And that's going to cover the same footprint as this background, so we can use our A variable again. And we need to give it a different colour. Let's make it white. And if we copy and paste this g.fill rounded rectangle, it will cover the same area, but obviously we can't see our background now. So we're going to have to change this area so that we can vary the width depending on the progress of our progress bar. So instead of A, we're going to create a new empty array, and for the X, we're going to use the same X we've got in A, which is going to be A element 0. So that's the X. For the Y, it's going to be the same thing, except we're going to use element 1. For the width, let's just put a question mark in there for now. And for the height, it's going to be A3. Of course, we could write all of this out again, but reusing this array makes sense here. It also means if we make any changes up here, it will be reflected down here. Okay, so this width parameter. What we want is, let's say our progress bar is at 50%. We want this white bar to stop in the middle. If it's at 75%, it's going to stop around here. If it's at 25%, it'll be down here. So the width is what's going to vary. So what we can see is that the width of the white bar is a fraction of the total width. Or in other words, we can use a percentage to calculate the total width. So if we put our width in here, which is A2, and if we were to divide that in half, for example, we're now at 50%. Another way of writing this division is as a multiplication. We can do times 0.5. And we get the same result, but this is a little easier to work with. For example, we can now do 0.75, and that gives us a 75% bar. Or 0.25 is 25%, and so on. So what we're working with here is what's called a normalized percentage. So this is the equivalent of going from 0 to 100, but instead we only have to go from 0 to 1. And it makes it really easy to do this kind of thing. So the question is, where do we get this variation from? How are we going to decide where our progress bar is at? And the way we're going to do that is with our timer callback. So all we're going to do is, as the timer runs through, it's going to change this value from 0 to 1, and it's going to do it in steps of 0.1. And we're going to do that by assigning it to the panel's value. So the panel itself has a value which we can get with this.getValue. And we're going to store that here in a variable called v. And instead of putting a number directly in here, we can just put v. So if v is 0.5, our progress bar will be at the center, and so on. Right, so now let's go to the timer callback. So in our timer, we need to do two things. We need to increment the counter, the value of the panel, and then we need to repaint the panel. So the repaint part is easy. We just write this.repaint. And what this command does is it just triggers this paint routine. So we'll redraw the panel and it will update the width of our progress bar. So now we're going to increment the panel's value. So to do that, there are a few ways we can do it, but let's write var x equals this dot get value. So we're storing the value of the panel. So whenever you see this, it refers to the object that we're working with. So in this case, we're working with PNL progress, so our panel. And that's the same here as well. So in here where you see this, it's referring to the panel. Where you see this here, it's referring to the panel. Okay, so we've got the value of the panel. So we're going to take x, and it's going to be equal to x plus 0.1. So we're incrementing it by 0.1. And then we're going to reassign it to the panel. So this dot set value as x. Now I've hit F5 and our progress bar is reset to 0. That's because we haven't triggered our timer yet. Another way we could write this, I'll comment that out. Another way we could write this is to put this dot set value is equal to this dot get value plus 0.1. So this will do the same thing, but because of something else we're going to do in a little while, I'm doing it in this longer version. Okay, and so we can see the value in the console. I'm going to print it out. So console.print x. And if we run this now, you'll see we'll hit a problem. So let's start our timer. So PNL progress dot start timer, and we'll run it 150 milliseconds. And watch what happens. So, and if you look down here in the console, you can see the number just keeps going up. Basically, we haven't put anything in here to stop the timer once we reach the end. So the progress bar just gets drawn forever. So we need to add an end stop. So what we can do is we can say if x is greater than or equal to 0.9 this dot stop timer. And we put 0.9 instead of 1 because we're increasing the value up here and we're repainting down here. So even though it stopped the timer, it's still going to do the repaint. So we're like 1 behind. You'll see what I mean. Let's put this down here. And let's make sure our panel is always starting at 0. So we'll just set the panel's value to 0 up here. And now let's uncomment the timer, the start timer. And I'll hit F5 now. We'll see in the console the value of x, and hopefully our progress bar will stop at the correct position. There we go, and we can see it stops at 1. So even though I'm stopping the timer at 0.9, it's going to be 1 extra. So that's why I did that. Okay, so that's it for a basic progress bar. But we're going to do something else in a moment, which is wide this longhand version of getting the variable up here. So as I said at the beginning of this, you can use this for animations as well, the same technique, but instead of drawing a progress bar, you change images. But usually with a progress bar, you don't want it to stop when it gets to the end. You want it to loop back to the beginning. So let's see how we can do that. So since we're just going to have it looping round, we no longer need to stop the timer. So I'll delete that line, and we'll delete that. And let's clear some of these empty lines here. So the key is going to be this line here. So what we want to do is we want to increase our x value, but once it gets to 1, we want to reset it to 0. So the usual way to do that kind of thing is with the modulo operator, which is the % sign, and then you'd put 1. So it would go x equals x plus 0.1, and then it does a division and returns the remainder. And the effect of that is it loops back round when it reaches the upper value, in this case 1. However, it won't work with values below 1, so this isn't going to work. So let me show you what will happen if we print this out. So I'll hit F5, and you can see we just get zeros. So the workaround for this is instead of just going up to 1, we go up to 10, and then down here where we're using the value, where we're getting it here, we just divide by 10. And now if I hit F5, oh, need to start the timer. Okay, now can you see we're not quite getting up to the full percentage here? we need to turn it up to 11. And of course, when you're doing animation, you'll want to be able to control the speed of this, so you can adjust the delay here for a smoother animation. You can decrease it, and for a more choppy or a blocky animation, you can increase it. Well, that's all I've got for you today. If you're one of my higher tier Patreon supporters, you're going to get a video later in the week showing how you can display the actual percentage on the progress bar as it's increasing, so look out for that one. If you have any questions or comments, please put them below. And as always, thanks for watching.